There are still open accounts with Iran, although Israel has brought the Ayatollah regime to its knees, exposing it as a paper tiger or maybe just a paper alley cat. The nakedness of Iran's power has been exposed, just as Hezbollah was. Now, after Israel's historic victory over Iran, the IDF's military focus has returned to the Gaza Strip. Welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm your host, Yair Pinto, bringing you the whole truth about what is happening in Israel. And it is my sad duty to report to you that we have suffered a severe disaster in Khan Yunis in the Gaza Strip, as 7 IDF soldiers were fatally hit in a single IED attack on their armored personal carrier. This came amidst intensified activities in Khan Yunis, where about half of the forces of Division 36 in Khan Yunis are engaged in active defense, while the other half is attacking a Hamas battalion that is still active in tunnels in the east of the city, near the border with Israel. The IDF withdrew brigades from the Strip in the past 2 weeks because of the war with Iran and admits there is less Air Force presence. The terrorists know it and feel more comfortable to ambush our forces. At the same time, more blood labels are coming against Israel at the United Nations regarding the accusations that the IDF is randomly opening fire on people coming to get humanitarian aid at distribution centers. The United Nations is ignoring evidence that Hamas is the one opening fire on these people, as if the IDF is the only group of people with weapons inside the Gaza Strip. And simultaneously, an unofficial mediator claims that there could be a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip within a few days. In an interview with Egypt's El Gahad channel, the Palestinian-American businessman Bashra Bakhbakh expressed optimism about the Gaza ceasefire after the Israeli-Iran war ended. And speaking of the war with Iran, we can give you a preliminary summary today on the first full day of the ceasefire. Israel managed to launch a wave of surprise strikes, eliminating the top security command and senior nuclear scientists in the first wave, but there was a price to pay. In return, we observed barrages of hundreds of missiles that caused 29 fatalities, hundreds of wounded, and billions of shekels in property damage. After Israel had significantly degraded Iran's air defense systems, the United States joined in and struck nuclear sites in Operation Midnight Hammer, after which Trump pushed for a ceasefire that ended what he called 12-day war. This series of events left Iran's military devastated, its regime in turmoil, and its economy in worse shape than ever. Now, Iran's Ayatollah regime is faced with dim prospects for the future, but things could get still worse for them. At the NATO summit that is ongoing this week in The Hague, Iran will be at the top of the list of issues discussed by the United States President Donald Trump and the heads of states of other allied countries, including the UK, France, and Germany. Will there be a return to nuclear negotiations? Will the snapback sanctions be reimposed? We might get some answers to those questions in the very near future. TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani will take us through some of the possible scenarios moving forward. Should Israelis prepare for another round with Iran? What have we really done to the nuclear facilities and the ballistic missile program? Is a rapid breakout to the simple bomb feasible? And how willing will the Iranians be for real negotiations and compromises? Also, what led to the ceasefire, which came as a surprise to almost everyone? Hours before the announcement, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei declared, "We will not surrender," and fired a barrage of 14 rockets at the El Udeid Air Base in Qatar, saying this was a response to the United States airstrikes on nuclear facilities at Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. President Trump rolled his eyes and said Iran's response was very weak. Thank you for the early warning. And meanwhile, Iranian officials said that the regime was open to new negotiations, but they demanded that President Trump put a stop to the Israeli attacks. Later, Israel's defense minister revealed in a closed briefing that dozens of Iranian UAVs were launched towards Israel after the ceasefire went into effect, and Israel remained silent, apparently willing to let it go as long as there is no Israeli casualties. Also, despite all the successes of this campaign, senior terrorists in Iran remain alive. Senior figures in Palestinian terror organizations who had been in Iran since the start of the campaign managed to escape despite the Israeli Air Force air superiority over the country. However, Israeli security officials promised their day will come as well. So, we will also bring you the story of how the Israeli Air Force succeeded in this campaign and how the Iranian Air Force collapsed step by step. Israel struck 6 airports in Iran, destroying Iran's fleets of American-built F-14s and F-5 aircrafts, Cobra attack helicopters, runways, and radar systems. The Iranian Air Force, which was amongst the region's strongest in the 1970s, has been almost non-operational since the 1979 revolution. In the aftermath of the war, there are signs that the reign of terror that the Revolutionary Guards used to keep Iran's population in line is beginning to crumble. The Iranian people are fed up and ready to throw off this yoke of tyranny. Some analysts are speculating that Iran could soon descend into civil war the way that Syria did in 2011. It was also reported yesterday that Israel knows where the stocks of enriched uranium that Iran removed from Fordo and Natanz before the strikes occurred is located, but chooses not to strike it for now. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what is happening in Israel on day 627 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shiite militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region acting under the control of Iran's Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the evil of Axis in the Middle East. And a moment before we start, I want to tell you that we at TBN Israel stand together with you for the sake of truth. Israel is winning the kinetic war, but is losing the information battle. For that, we need you to show up and help us share the truth. Share, follow us, yes, help the truth by clicking the subscribe button and stay tuned to what's happening in Israel in real time and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. After the ceasefire agreement with Iran, Gaza again returns to the center of attention. A lot happened in the Gaza Strip over the last 2 weeks when most of the attention was on the hostilities with Iran, so let's review some of the highlights. Israel renewed the entry of dozens of aid trucks to the Gazans, while on the ground, more terrorists emerged from their tunnels to come out and ambush the Israeli forces that remain inside the Gaza Strip. Friction is increasing, mainly in eastern Khan Yunis, which has seen intensified fighting with the local Hamas battalions and its commanders who are still active. However, the pace of fighting in the Gaza Strip in the past 2 weeks, which in any case was very slow and limited, slowed even more after Gaza became a secondary combat arena and the division's forces, brigades such as Golani and 188, found themselves split in two. About half of the fighters turned to active defense missions in the temporary outposts in the south of the Gaza Strip, mainly around the Bet Or Morag route, while the other half of the division's forces remained for offensive missions. The IDF intentionally slowed the pace of these offensive operations against Hamas as the pace of fighting in Iran intensified. For example, in the terror organization's strongholds in the Gaza Strip, but also in the area of Khan Yunis. Additionally, forces were withdrawn from Gaza in order to reinforce the northern border as a precautionary move against the possibility of Hezbollah attacking Israel in support of Iran. Some forces were also sent to reinforce security in other areas as security reassessments showed an increased risk of unrest. All of this gave Hamas the illusion that the IDF was weakening in the Gaza Strip, and that led to increased boldness from them to operate against the forces that remained. Friction increased in many areas, with ambushes, booby traps, and other tactics increasingly employed by the terrorists. Division 36 deployed 4 brigades between Rafah and Khan Yunis, and almost every day there are several exchanges of fire. Operations continue, and the Qatari neighborhood Hamid, with its orange buildings, most of which are still intact, is still not under the IDF control, along with other areas in western Khan Yunis. Thus, the fighting these days is focused in the east of the city, close to the border with Israel, in the Absan neighborhoods, where the IDF has maneuvered several times since 7th of October 2023, but Hamas, as in other areas, has returned there and rebuilt itself. The local Hamas battalion in the area is considered relatively strong and still has underground combat systems that have not yet been located. The Absan battalion of Hamas even has a commander and a reasonable command and control structures, but the IDF reports that the many encounters are still taking place against local cells or lone terrorists who exploit locally weak points or jump out from shafts and other terrorist tunnels to place booby traps on IDF logistical routes and many houses where they estimate that the forces will operate in the future. Of course, they also attack the IDF vehicles when they can, and on Tuesday afternoon, they managed to land a heavy blow. The IDF spokesman announced on Wednesday morning that an officer and 6 soldiers were fatally wounded when an emergency APC in Khan Yunis in the southern Gaza Strip was destroyed by an improvised explosive device. An initial inquiry shows that terrorists attached an explosive device to the APC of combat engineering soldiers and then fled the scene. The vehicle, which is an older Puma model, was completely destroyed in the resulting explosion and in the fire. It took several hours for the bodies of the soldiers inside to be identified. In a related story, alongside the fighting against terrorists, one of the significant challenges occupying the fighters these days in Khan Yunis concerns the humanitarian issue. Hundreds of soldiers are required each day to enforce the red lines along the Morag corridor that tens of thousands of Palestinians must not cross on their way to collect food packages from the 4 food distribution centers that Israel has opened in the past month in the area through American contractor company. 2 of those centers are considered very crowded and prone to violent incidents because of the sheer number of people who come to them in search of food every single day. This reality often leads to friction between the residents and the IDF soldiers, who fire warning shots in the air in order to try and keep the residents away from their positions. Almost every day, this results in videos being filmed that appear to show that the IDF soldiers are firing their weapons, resulting in the deaths of Gazan residents. These videos are doing terrible damage to Israel's public image all over the world, as they are often accompanied by commentary which makes it sound like these soldiers are deliberately shooting desperate Gazans who they've lured there with a promise of food. However, there is another side to this story. On the other side of Khan Yunis, that same population has to cross improvised checkpoints of the terrorist organization Hamas, which routinely shoots these residents for any and all reasons, with the overreaching reason of trying to instill fear in them so that they will obey Hamas's orders to them. No one ever takes any films of these incidents to show to the world that Hamas is a terrorist organization that is brutally abusing the Palestinian population in Gaza. But the good news is that there are increasing indications that Gaza residents have broken through the barrier of fear and are ready to defy Hamas even at the fear of death. There are also growing signs that Gaza residents give credit to Israel for providing them with the food and the humanitarian supplies that they need, while Hamas just exploits and brutalizes them. That's great news. Now, all we have to do is convince the millions of anti-Israel people all around the world of what these Gazan residents have already figured out. So guys, do you have any ideas about how we can do that? Let me know in the comments section. I'd really like to hear what you have to say about how can we improve the fact of sharing the truth of what Israel is doing in the Gaza Strip. Now, getting back to the ongoing combat operations in the Gaza Strip, IDF forces operate in the Strip within the framework of 4 maneuvering divisions and take part in intense fighting against terrorist squads at several focal points. Exchanges of fire are recorded throughout the week, and the IDF has eliminated several terror squads in these exchanges of fire. With the ceasefire with Iran coming into effect, the army is preparing to return a 5th maneuvering division to the Gaza Strip, a process that may materialize within a few days. The IDF currently operates in 4 main sectors throughout the Gaza Strip, combining ground, intelligence, and air efforts. Now, with the war against Iran concluded, attention is shifting back to the Strip, and initial signs point to the possibility of a political deal. So guys, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development in the fighting in the Gaza Strip, and guys, we pray for the safety of our brave soldiers fighting against the murderous terrorist organization, Hamas. And 1 second before we continue to what's happening against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, keep spreading the truth, share, and most importantly, do not forget to hit that subscribe button. So let's continue, but first, I need to tell you about something very important. As we've talked about in previous reports, in the security situation across Israel, it remains very difficult. The Iranian missiles strike on cities like Tel Aviv, Haifa, and the south, and they resulted in massive damage and hundreds of wounded every single day. Civilians are being targeted, families are injured, buildings are destroyed, and right there in the middle of it all is Magen David Adom. Their medics are the first on the scene, treating the wounded, stabilizing victims, saving lives, sometimes under fire, sometimes after being injured themselves. Just this week, 2 Magen David Adom volunteers were hit by shrapnel when their ambulance was struck during a missile barrage in Tel Aviv, and still they kept helping others. That's who they are, that's what they do. But they cannot do it alone. They need your help. Magen David Adom is entirely dependent on donations. So if you want to help them, go to savelifeisrael.com. Again, that's savelifeisrael.com. Your support means more ambulances, better protection, and trained responders who can act fast no matter what's coming next. Magen David Adom is saving lives. Let's help them keep going and save more lives here in Israel. Now, let's get back to the news, because after the ceasefire with Iran went into effect on Tuesday morning and ended 12 days of intense fighting against the power that had frightened us for years here in the Middle East, Israel proved to the world that Iran is a paper tiger. They make a lot of fiery speeches and threats, but in the end, they aren't able to match their words with actions. On the other hand, Israel doesn't make any threats, but when the time comes to act, we are ready to act. Let me give you a few statistics that make this point. The Air Force, which succeeded in penetrating Iran's air defense arrays after years of preparations, carried out about 1,200 sorties during the 12 days of this fighting, dropping thousands of munitions on military targets. About 80 SAM batteries and 250 ballistic missile launchers were destroyed in these strikes. In addition, more than 600 aerial refuelings were carried out. These are only part of the Corps' achievements that obtained up to the ceasefire. In previous plans, Israel prepared to attack the Islamic Republic's nuclear facilities in 1 or 2 strikes. However, in the current campaign, Israel succeeded in going out for strikes, cycling, and in attack waves multiple times. In the initial wave of attacks, the Air Force disseminated Iran's defensive arrays from the outside inward. Thus, the aircraft, including fighter jets and UAVs, operated in Iranian airspace almost without interference for the entirety of this campaign. The Air Force's activities during the past 12 days was carried out within the framework of the two declared goals of this campaign, which are removing the nuclear threat and removing the ballistic missile threat. In response, the IRGC reacted forcefully, but not against Israel, but rather against the only enemy it has any ability to strike, and that's the Iranian people. Reports emerged on Wednesday that as many as 700 Iranian citizens have been arrested on suspicion of collaboration with Israel, and several of them have already been executed. A report in the Iranian media portal News declared, without citing any evidence, that those who were arrested cooperated with Mossad and smuggled equipment that the organization used in the assassinations that it carried out in Iran. It seems that the most violent and dysfunctional regime in the Middle East is looking for scapegoats for its defeat. So guys, keep spreading the truth, share, and follow us. And above all, give a click to that subscribe button so that you remain tuned to the truth in real time. Now, let's turn to TBN Israel senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani, who will explain what is going to happen in the near future in this region.
12 days of bombing and attacks on Iran by Israel and then joined by the US end abruptly as President Trump declares a ceasefire agreement, which is immediately after violated by the Iranians. But today we stand at a historical, at a unique moment in time where the Iranians are left without almost all of their nuclear program, Israel is victorious, and the US stands by to rebuild the shambles of what's left of the Iranian foreign policy in the Middle East. We're living in a dynamic and a unique time. The history that has taken place in this last 2 weeks in this region is nothing short of unique, groundbreaking, and historical. So let's break this down. What happened? First of all, just to remind everyone, on the night of June 13th, Israel strikes within Iran and brings down, well, hell from above on the Iranian nuclear program and many of the heads of that nuclear program. But even more interestingly, Israel dominates the Iranian airspace for days on end, completely unchallenged by Iranian defenders. And then the story gets even worse. The US joins this game and bombs the remaining large Iranian nuclear facilities, Isfahan, Natanz, Fordow, turning these facilities that are deep bunkers underground into piles of rubble. What we know now is that this attack carried out by the US, executed mostly by 7 B-2 bombers carrying some of these incredible bunker buster bombs, it left what was left of the Iranian nuclear program in complete piles of rubble. The Iranians lost their centrifuges. They lost the majority of their enriched uranium stockpiles. Much of it is underground in piles of rubble, and what remains and has been hidden in other places is being tracked by intelligence. This war goes on for multiple days after the US attack, and after this original US attack, the Iranians strike back, sending multiple ballistic missiles against American targets in Qatar. The problem is that this feeble Iranian attempt was announced in advance to the Americans to make sure there weren't actually any casualties. President Trump comes out and he says to the Iranians and to the world, look, your response was unimpressive, your response was weak, it was feeble, and you've shown your weakness to the world. Meanwhile, Israel continues to dominate the Iranian airspace, bombing time and time again, bringing down hell from above on the leaders that remain of the Iranian government. At the end of this 12-day skirmish between Israel and the Iranians, and again, the Americans are the secondary party in this, or tertiary party in this, the Iranians are left with very little of their nuclear program. Almost all of it is gone, along with many of the leaders of the IRGC, almost all the leaders of the Iranian nuclear program, and many of the leaders of the Iranian military. And it gets even better and even more interesting than that. The American strike on Iran shows something that is very important for the world to understand. When the US strikes the Iranian facilities, specifically the ones that are buried deep underground, they do so in a very special way. They're undetected by radar completely during and after the attack, as in the Iranians don't even know what hit them until they realize that their nuclear facilities have blown up in pieces or collapsed into caves underground. This shows the power of the American Air Force. It shows their ability to bring death from above to bunkers buried deep underground, but it also does something else that's incredibly important. It exposes the vulnerability of the Russian air defenses and missiles. And here's the backstory over here. Russia is the one supplying the Iranians. Much of the Iranian air defenses, as used by other countries in this region, is Russian S-300 and other anti-aircraft systems. Their radar systems are Soviet-made systems or Russian-made systems. And this attack, along with the Israeli attack over the last 18 months on Iran, it shows you to what degree Russian military systems are lesser than that of the Western Bloc. And let me explain. The fact that the tiny Israeli Air Force was able in a matter of hours to dominate the Iranian airspace, to knock out whatever was remaining of their anti-aircraft batteries and radar systems, it shows the superiority of the American-made and Israeli-implemented fire systems. The F-16s, the F-15s, the missiles that they launch, the F-35s with their, stealth abilities. And of course, when you get to the B-2 bombers, it just shows what a gap exists between the American weapon systems and the Russian-made weapon systems. This whole situation reshapes the perception of power that Russia has in this part of the world and causes other allies of the Iranians, namely the Chinese, to double calculate or recalculate and calibrate what they're planning to do about the Americans. And we've already started to see the echoes of exactly that, of the people that are already saying, we might have underestimated the US's ability and overestimated our ability to stop them. So we're in a really interesting place when it comes to that, and a really interesting place that will ripple across the Middle East and into Asia, and of course the war between Russia and Ukraine, as to how powerful the Americans are and how much gravitas, how much weight the words of the American president have when it comes to reshaping diplomacy. Now let's go back to the Iranians. So a ceasefire was reached just 2 nights ago after the US response to the Iranian attack. President Trump calls up the Israeli Prime Minister and the cabinet, calls up the Iranians and says to them, look, we talked to the Israelis, they're ready to get to a ceasefire. Israel officially says, look, we've essentially achieved everything we wanted from this conflict so far. We've eliminated the scientists, the heads of the nuclear program, the IRGC leaders. We've humiliated the Iranians. We've been flying sorties through their skies, undisturbed in the middle of the day. They're just unable to stop us. And most importantly, the entire world has seen the power gap between us and them, including the Iranian people. So mission accomplished. We've destabilized the government, we've exposed their weakness, we've removed the leadership, and we've hit the targets we wanted to hit, especially after the aid of the American B-2 bomber missions that took out those big, hardened underground targets. President Trump goes back to the Iranians after the Israeli government says yes, and he says to them, hey, let's reach a ceasefire. They agree. This goes into effect yesterday in the morning, yesterday being Tuesday, and the Iranians almost immediately violate the ceasefire agreement by launching a symbolic barrage of ballistic missiles against Israel that killed over 4 people in southern Israel in the city called Beersheba and injured others. President Trump is furious, reportedly, warns the Iranians not to retaliate, and Israel, by the way, is on the way to bomb in Iran when we get a phone call and a tweet, I should say, by President Trump that says, don't dare bomb Iran again because this will ruin the ceasefire over a mistake made by the Iranians. Israel still drops the bombs, they just do it in a symbolic target, blowing out a radar site instead of probably something more dramatic that was planned. And we're now in a place of a ceasefire. And this is a fragile ceasefire. Right now, we really need to track and see where this is going. Will the Iranians make a run or a dash to start rebuilding their nuclear program? Will we have a blitz round of negotiations that will result in an agreement? Or more likely, will this be a drawn-out process where an international organization is built to supervise the Iranians, where the Iranians are dismantled of what's left of their enriched uranium, and where Israel is guaranteed that we won't once again face the threat of a nuclear Iran? And it's more complicated than that. Iran isn't the only player that's taken place in this. The conflict between Israel and Iran reshapes the power balance of this region. It makes us understand the relationship with Lebanon, Hezbollah differently, with Gaza, Hamas differently, with the Houthis in Yemen. They've all seen what the US and Israel combined are able to bring to the battlefield. And what we're able to bring is much more than the Iranians can stop. And now that that fact has been established, and it's clear to everyone who's looking at this, that there's only one victorious side in this conflict, which is Israel, along with the US, and not the Iranians, this will reshape the Middle East that we live in. Now is the time for hopeful processes, for hopeful change, such as Abraham Accords 2.0 or 3.0, depending on how you're counting, for Saudi Arabia to enter into the fold when it comes to an agreement with Israel and rebuilding this region, for a sense and force of stability to reshape this region in a way where maritime trade can move freely, and the threat of Iranian exported terrorism is lesser than ever before in my lifetime. And this is a hopeful message. This is a positive message, but it took the boldness of the Israeli Air Force to strategically attack the Iranians, to expose their vulnerability, to take a calculated risk, knowing full well that this could blow back dramatically against the people of Israel. It took that level of commitment and risk to reach this point. And the world we live in now is completely different. The US is stronger than ever before as far as the perception of power goes. Every country around the world that was considering going against the US, specifically the Chinese and the Russians, directly or indirectly, now knows what the US is able to bring to bear against Iran and any other adversary that would come their way. And it gets more important. The same applies also to Israel. Every country around the world knows what Israel is able to do. If we were able to bomb the Iranians over 1,000 miles away and do so repeatedly and knock out their air defenses day after day, well, we could do the same to you if you're an enemy of the state of Israel. We're stronger now, we're more resilient, and peace in this region comes out of strength and resilience. And now that Israel and the US have shown ample amounts of fortitude, of strength, of projection of power, now is a time for peace, now is a time for calm in this region. And God knows the people of Israel deserve that. God knows the people of this region deserve a time of peace and rebuilding and prosperity. But we're not done yet. There's one big piece that still remains on the table, and that is the hostages in Gaza. Israel can't rest and can't stop until Hamas is dismantled and all the hostages are returned to Israel by Hamas. And this will require international activity, international pressure to make sure that this happens quickly, and a relentless pressure on the Israeli army to bring back those hostages and stop the control of Hamas. So for all of those around the world who are calling for a ceasefire and for peace, absolutely, you are correct. That happens when we get back every last hostage. And to the people of Iran, we want to remind them that from the Israeli Prime Minister and down, the people of Israel don't resent the Iranian people. We love the Iranian people, and we believe that they deserve better than the Ayatollah regime that has controlled Iran for so many years. They deserve peace, they deserve prosperity, and they deserve something that isn't radical Islam. I believe we're entering a time of peace and prosperity in this region that is the result of people standing up against evil. And that is a takeaway from everything that's happened, that when you face this type of evil, an evil that is planning to destroy our way of life and belief, the only way to go against it is with massive show of power, of resolve, and resilience as a people. And that's exactly what the people of Israel and our ally, the US, have shown. Now back to Yair Pinto.
Thank you very much, Mati, for bringing some clarity to our very, very complex situation and giving us a glimpse into the near future in this neighborhood, the Middle East. And guys, please continue to spread the truth, share, and follow us. And most important, don't forget to stand with Israel and enlist in our war for sharing the truth. Together, we will bring the world what is really happening in Israel so that everybody will know how to pray for the situation. So guys, if you want to help us, it's very important that you hit the subscribe button, share, comment, and let people know what truly is happening in this war. So guys, the operational successes of Israel in Operation Rising Lion included completing all the objectives set in the war against Iran in the nuclear and in the missile fields. Nevertheless, the Israeli media portal Kan News published a report on Tuesday saying that despite the air superiority achieved by the Air Force in Iranian skies, Israel did not succeed in eliminating senior officials of the Palestinian terrorist organization staying in the country of Iran. To explain, in Iran, there are senior figures of terrorist organizations who receive support from the Quds Force of the Revolutionary Guards, for example, senior Islamic Jihad officials and also senior Hezbollah members. These officials should have been amongst those eliminated in this campaign if there had been an operational opportunity to do so. However, security sources told Kan News that the desire to exploit opportunities and foil as many seniors as possible in the axis of evil has not passed, and they clarify their day will come as well, if not now, then in the future. In other words, we didn't get them this time, but tomorrow is another day. Now, let me tell you about some of the people that we did get this time. They include most of Iran's senior military officers, IRGC commanders, nuclear scientists, and many senior aides to the clerical hierarchy. In addition, on Tuesday evening, it was reported that Abu Ali Khalil, the former bodyguard of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, was terminated while crossing the border from Iraq to Iran together with a commander in a pro-Iranian militia in Iraq. Was this, as is being reported, an accident because someone forgot the password? Or was it an indication that Iran's terrorist supporting network is breaking down and turning against itself? We'll know more in the days ahead, but for now, it's good to hear that the world is a little bit safer because this evil man isn't with us any longer. And speaking of which, earlier this week, Israel eliminated in the city of Qom Said Izzadeh, the commander of the Palestinian corps in the Quds Force of the Revolutionary Guards, who in recent weeks had been operating Hamas and Islamic Jihad cells in Syria to create pockets of attacks against Israel and to undermine the rule of the al-Julani regime in Syria. If al-Julani is watching this, I want to tell him that he doesn't need to say thank you because Israel was just doing its job, and anyway, this is what friends are for. And getting back to Izzadeh, he was responsible for supporting, funding, and smuggling weapons, as well as for training and instructing military operatives of Hamas and Islamic Jihad in the Gaza Strip and in Judea and Samaria. In addition, he was also responsible for coordinating between Hamas and Hezbollah, one of the founders of Hamas branch in Lebanon, and was also responsible for recruiting Israeli citizens for espionage missions. In his role, Said Izzadeh was the liaison between the Islamic Republic regime and Hamas, and one of the founders of Iran's program to destroy Israel. In this role, he was one of the architects of the 7th of October attack and one of the few who knew about it before it was carried out. During the Iron Swords War, Izzadeh was also responsible for activating Hamas forces in Lebanon and worked to preserve Hamas's rule in the Gaza Strip. So he won't be doing any of that any longer, and it will take the IRGC a long time to find someone who can replace him. This is one of the reasons there is increased hope that Hamas might soon agree to release the remaining hostages, because they must know by now that no more help is coming from Iran for them. So guys, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report to you everything that we know about what's happening in Israel. If you want to help us reach more people and know the truth about this land, hit the subscribe button and stand with the truth and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Now, a moment ago, I spoke about the hopes for a negotiated end to the conflict in the Gaza Strip, which would include the release of the remaining Israeli hostages, which is really all Israel still wants from Hamas at this point. There is some good news on that front, and here it is. The Palestinian-American businessman Bashra Banbach, who serves as an intermediary between Hamas and the United States of America, gave an interview with the Egyptian channel El Gahed and Barbach on Tuesday, in which he addressed the residents of the Gaza Strip, directly saying, "We have not forgotten you, and we will not forget you. We are serious in our work to find a permanent solution and a ceasefire as soon as possible." Asked about the state of the negotiations for the ceasefire in Gaza, Barbach explained that there are many proposals, some comprehensive and some partial, but the first goal now is to achieve a ceasefire that will allow humanitarian aid to enter for all Gaza residents, medical care for the needs of the Gaza Strip's residents and the possibility for exiting the Gaza Strip for those that their conditions require it. Bach expressed optimism, especially after the end of the war between Israel and Iran, and Gaza's return to the focus of attention. And according to him, this is true not only for the Palestinians, who always focus on their issue and on Gaza, but also for Israel and the American administration. According to him, the Gaza issue is different from the Iran issue, but with the Iranian matter finished, there is now serious focus with the Egyptians, the Qataris, the American mediators on achieving a permanent ceasefire as soon as possible, and he stressed that he is optimistic that the ceasefire in Gaza will be announced within days. So guys, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to pray for our hostages who are held in the Gaza Strip, and we invite you to join us. So let us pray together for their release and their quick return home in peace and health to their families. I also want to pay my last respects to the Israeli heroes who fell on Tuesday defending the people of Israel in Gaza. This morning, the names of 6 of the fallen were cleared for publication. They are Lieutenant Matan Shai Yishnovsky, 21, from Kfar Yona, a platoon commander in Combat Engineering Battalion 605. Staff Sergeant Ronen Ben Moshe, 20 years of age, from Rehovot. Staff Sergeant Niv Radia, 20 years of age, from Eliachin. And Sergeant Ronen Shapiro, 19, from Mazkeret Batya, together with Sergeant Shachar Manuav, 21, from Ashkelon, and Sergeant Maayan Baruch Perlstein, 20, from Mashhad, all fighters in the Engineering Battalion 605. The name of another fallen soldier has not yet been cleared for publication. So together, let's continue to pray for the well-being of the IDF soldiers wherever they are, if they're fighting in the Gaza Strip, if they're fighting in Syria, in Lebanon, or in the skies above Iran. Let's pray for peace to their families. Let's pray for their children, if they have children. Let's pray for their safety and for the family unit. And let's continue to pray for the people of Iran, for all those innocent lives that are affected by these terrorist organizations. And let's unite in prayer for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.